I hear a lot about how deregulation is the savior of all things. Got a child that won't go to bed? Well, if we had deregulated markets, can't figure out how to open childproof packaging? Well, if we had deregulated markets, can't figure out why my wife is mad at me? Well, if we had deregulated markets, it seems this phrase becomes the answer to anything and everything. Many people on the right talk about small government and laissez-faire principles in the market. There is one major problem with this thinking. They are purely theoretical and cannot exist in the real world. Why? Well, let us dive into it. Capitalism and the free market. Capitalism is defined as an economic system in which there is private ownership over the means of production and their operation for profit. It is built around the idea of a market economy where decision-making and investment are determined by every owner of wealth, property, or production ability in financial and capital markets, whereas prices and the distribution of goods and services are mainly determined by competition in goods and service markets. What you will hear from the right is that the freer the market, the freer the people. A completely unregulated market has to meet certain conditions in order for it to be considered free. These conditions set a theoretical framework to allow a concept known as pure or perfect competition. Pure or perfect competition. See, perfect competition is defined as the theoretical market structure in which the following criteria are met. All firms are price takers. They cannot influence the market price of their product. Market share has no influence on price. Buyers have complete or perfect information in the past, present, and future about the product being sold and the prices charged by each firm. Resources such as labor are perfectly mobile, and firms can enter or exit the market without any cost. Under perfect competition, there needs to be a large number of buyers and sellers. These sellers would be small firms and not multinational corporations that control pricing through supply. They would all sell product with minimal differences in quality, features, and pricing that buyers cannot distinguish between products based upon non-functional factors, like branding and color. As of today, we have large corporations in which a handful of companies own the majority of all products that are sold. This makes for a few number of sellers. The fact that economic nationalism has increased means that the pool of buyers is decreasing as we shy away from the global economy. In addition, if buyers do not have enough disposable income, then they effectively cannot buy many goods. Therefore, an economy has to be doing well in order to realize this condition. Another aspect of perfect competition is something called perfect information. It's a concept in which everything that can be possibly known about a product is right there and accessible. This allows consumers to make the best educated choices. Perfect information is in fact just a theory and cannot actually be produced in our current structure. Why? 1. Time and energy. It takes way too much time and energy to effectively research every product that you buy. When you go to the store and buy a loaf of bread, you do not price check every store within a 5-mile radius when you choose your bread. You pick the loaf within your price range that has the qualities that you like wheat or white, crust or no crust, multigrain or not. The consumer looks at all the choices on the shelf, but actually doesn't compare prices across the entire spectrum of where one can purchase those products. The time spent researching would be a net loss in value, because time equals money. So most people just choose between the breads in front of them. Beyond that, most Americans don't have the time to even spend to adequately research the products they are buying to begin with. 2. Asymmetric information, also known as information failure, occurs when one party to an economic transaction possesses greater material knowledge than the other party. This typically manifests when the seller of a good or service possesses more knowledge than the buyer. However, the reverse dynamic is also possible. Asymmetric information has positive and negative outcomes. A professional selling more than a farmer ultimately helps the farmer by having a broker that can make them more money. A doctor knowing more than the patient about cancer can literally save their life. However, on the negative, we have companies that will hide information or not disclose everything about their product, like how risky their product is or how fast it breaks down because of build quality or planned obsolescence. Apple. And 3, absence of controls. This boils down to regulation. Things like workers' rights, licensure, and barriers to entry in certain markets that increase the cost of starting a business. In a perfectly competitive market, these controls would not exist. This does not mean that if we deregulated everything, we would achieve perfect competition because all other conditions would still have to be met. Now here's the kicker. Pure or perfect competition cannot exist because it would require the absence of competition. If all of the conditions above were met, then competition wouldn't exist. Companies would not be able to distinguish themselves based upon brands since there is perfect information and products would be indistinguishable from each other. No company would be able to influence price through market share because all firms would be small. No company would be allowed to influence supply and demand by artificially causing low supply or high demand. Companies would not be able to reap no more profit than what is needed to run the business, since new businesses would enter the market and cause them to lower their price. Imperfect competition exists whenever a market, hypothetical or real, violates the abstract tenets of neoclassical pure or perfect competition. Since all real markets exist outside the plane of the perfect competition model, each can be classified as imperfect. Various forms of imperfect markets exist and are: 1. Oligopoly. This is a market dominated by very few producers. This can happen when the main players in the market collude to reduce competition, raise barriers to entry, or manipulate prices. In most oligopolies, each player is aware of what each competitor is doing since there are so few of them. America has many oligopolies. 6 movie studios receive nearly 87% of all film revenue. 7 major companies control the country's television and high-speed internet. 4 wireless providers control 89% of the mobile telephone service market. 2. Monopolistic. This is a market in which there are many producers that sell products, which are differentiated from another. Common industries where this market exists is restaurants, hotels, specialist retailing, and consumer services. These products are differentiated by 4 different ways: the actual product, size, color, design or shape, marketing, distinctive packaging or promotional techniques, human capital, training and skill, and distribution, box stores versus online. This sort of market creates some positives such as no barriers to entry, differentiation, creates choice and utility, and are generally more efficient than monopolies. However, some of the differentiation does not create any utility, but unnecessary waste and produces inefficiency in the long and short term. 3. Monopoly. This is a market where there is just one producer/seller of a product or service, and the barrier to entry in that market is prevented or highly constricted. In some cases, monopolies are created through market failures, and in other cases, they are created through government intervention. And in some important sectors of the economy, the government creates a monopoly to help control prices, such as utilities or public transport. Governments may only create a monopoly for national security reasons or to scale it to compete globally. Not all monopolies are bad, though. If a monopoly can create a market in which the only profit taken is what is needed for the business operations, can consistently deliver or produce a product and keep it at the same price point, and brings about a level of ease when it comes to obtaining the product or service, then a monopoly can have great benefits. In fact, there is a monopoly present on every single product sold and is used by every single company in order to order supplies and materials. Can you guess what it is? The barcode. The barcode is the largest monopoly that no one bats an eye over. Why? Because it allows people to easily conduct business and order materials. When you order an item with a barcode X, you know you're getting the same exact product every single time. You will not order a black fine tip Sharpie and receive a red extra large Sharpie, unless it's due to human error. I also did about a video about the Monopoly board game, which should be linked below. While the board game is based more on the economic principles of Georgism economics, it still is a great watch. 4. Monopsony. This is a market in which there are several producers but only one buyer. The biggest example of this is the defense industry. The United States of America employs over 120,000 workers, with 85% of their annual sales being from government contracts. Talk about someone that needs big government. Why I made this video. The reason why I made this video is to present the same argument I hear about when it comes to socialism or communism. It is theory, and it will never work in the real world. Free markets are based upon theories that are impossible to create. Perfect competition cannot exist, and because of that, we will have market failures that will exist and cause harm to those without the power and capital to correct them. Free markets are a utopian concept with no real way to materialize in the real world, period. Government and markets are intertwined for many reasons. It is up to us as the people to clearly define the parameters that our markets should exist and develop. Elections have consequences, and my generation will pay for the long-term effects of Trump and his disastrous policies. It's up to us to become more informed citizens and make educated decisions on our future. Believing in ideas like free markets and trying to create them is fruitless and also a pipe dream. Economics is a social science. It is in the same category as political science, anthropology, history, and sociology. I'm not downplaying them. I have a bachelor's in political science, but I'm merely pointing out that many on the right point out how useless these areas of studies are. Hopefully, we can stop with this idea of free markets and focus our time and energy on creating a market through government and private cooperation that creates equality and a reasonable standard of living for all. Hopefully, you guys liked that, and if you did, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, thumbs down. Share my video, comment down below, follow me on Twitter. I do talk back, and I like having conversations with people. So if you disagree with something, let me know, and let's talk about it. Anyways, thanks for listening, guys, and have a good one.